Hey guys, what's going on? It's Corey Vanderplu at Corey Photo on Twitter and Instagram. Today, I'm going through a couple landscape images taken on the Pacific Coast Trail. A few years ago, a friend of mine wants to hang these in his home, and he figured he'd give them to me so I could wave my magic wand over them. Now, they weren't raw images, they were JPEGs that I've converted into TIFFs, and they're ready to get retouched, so let's just jump right in. Alright, first image. You can see that when I take the curves layer and go down and up, you can see that there is some spots on there. Must be from the sensor, so let's get rid of those first. New layer. I use a J tool for cleaning up. Now I'm using a normal brush. We're just going to get rid of that. Very simple. Get rid of this curves layer because we don't need it. And you can see there's another one right here. But very simple to get rid of. Now, I already like his crop. I don't think I'm going to crop any of these, to be honest. I love what he's done with the crops, so no need for that. Now, I'm just going to use my normal treatment setup that I have for my skin and tones. You can see the whole video right up here in the corner. I'm going to show you how versatile it is and that it can be used on almost any image. So let me click play here. You can see that I got a warning here. That's because I usually have a crop on. You can see if I delete this and just turn on a crop, you can see here that this would be my crop. Then I would put my treatment on and there's no warning message. But because I like his crops, I'm going to skip over that. Every time I click play, since it's at the very end, you can just hit continue. But I already like how this looks. I already really like how this looks. You can see here I have a curves layer that really is just a curve layer brought all the way down. I have the same one, a curves layer, but it's raised in the lower mids. I have a brightness and contrast hit all the way. I have a hue and saturation that comes down 25 points. And then I have an overall curves move. And this is, sometimes I just use this curve layer. So if it blows out to complete white, as you can see here, this one doesn't. It just makes the edges a little bit more defined. You can see here if I blow this completely out, you can see that it's just a slightly shade different than white. So when it's posted on Instagram or on my website, there's a clear border. But I don't think we need that for right now. So let's go back to where we were. All right, so I'm going to start with the brightness layer. Make sure I have a low opacity brush, somewhere around 13, and just dot it in. Dot in where I think it's a little too dark. I want to see these stones up here. Now I'm not doing anything special. I'm really just shooting from the hip here. I haven't really thought anything out. I just like opening up. It's a great exercise for this to just open up a file and start retouching. These trees are a little underexposed. I like to see in the raw how much detail there actually is, and there looks like there's actually quite a bit. So I'm going to do a second curves layer and just boost it up so I can see the greens. See that? Big difference in the greens there. So get rid of this. And then just paint it in. Small brush, low opacity, and just dot it in. And zoom in here. You can see these files aren't the highest of res, but to make a small 11 by 14 print, these will do just fine. Make sure you get in here. I just don't like these to be completely inky black. I like there to be some detail in them. Don't have to go overboard. Just dot it in. Wherever you see something that's a little too black, just dot it in. But again, use your gut on this one. This looks much nicer. Alright, let's do the same thing where it's a little too bright. Maybe coming in here. Maybe the sky can even take it to make the sky a little bit more defined. I just did a video on how to get the most out of your sky, and this is a kind of a small little version of it. You don't want to go too crazy. Big brush, low opacity, and just kind of eat away at it. A retoucher that I used to work for used to call it peeling back the layers of an onion. I think that's all you need. Nothing too crazy. I like this little sheen coming off the rocks, but you can see that it's eaten into the rocks quite a bit. So what I'm going to do is push X. You can see my artboards here are reversed. Use just a little bit more of an opacity brush, say 20%, and just paint it back in kind of the same similar fashion. You can just dot it in. Going a little bit over the edges, but nothing crazy. You want to do subtle moves on a broad scope for now, and then we'll go in and refine it a little bit better. But this already looks pretty nice and natural. Just coming in a little bit closer just to get a little bit more detail closer to the edge. Looks good enough. And this already looks great. Just gonna do a couple more dots in here just to make it a little bit brighter. Just to balance out the trees, but it has a really nice look to it. Now this is just a little bit blue, so I'm gonna go into my color balance. Get rid of the blues a little bit, add a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow. This is great. I think I might even be able to use just a couple more points of contrast. Love that. Now I'm going to go in one more time over the sky, just because I'm a sky nut. Because look at that, could all be there. So what I'm going to do is get rid of that. Use my M tool, my marquee tool, paint over the sky, and delete that layer. And now we're just going to paint it back. You can be pretty crude here. I'm going to show you that I'm just going to be using my opacities. So I'm not going to get this sky fully this crazy, but I'm going to try and get it pretty close. So now I'm going to take a smaller brush, maybe somewhere in the 60%, and just eat more of these mountains. Now you can see I'm not doing a very good job here, but I'm going to go back and paint over it again. It's just kind of like give and take. And now I'm going to go in and do it a little bit more refined. This one takes a little bit longer, but you'll see it makes a big difference. Here we go. Alright, so that's pretty good. You can see it's a little sloppy. But again, I'll tell you why you don't have to worry about that. Just get it somewhat close. So this is our before and after sky. I think that's way too blue. So now all I'm going to do is take the opacity of this and bring it way down. Just enough to get a little blue in here. You see, I don't really like the blue all the way hard there, because you see this beautiful light coming down. So I really just want a hint of it. Maybe something around 20%. This way, when the light is coming over the edge here, it would naturally blow that out. I really just want a little bit of blue around the edges, the highlights right here. Alright, so that's me doing my treatment. Now what I'm going to do is, you can see the before and after is quite drastic. I actually see a big difference in here. So I'm actually going to go back and tweak that. I don't want to mess with the integrity too much. Alright, anyways, so now everything's back in the group, and you can see the before and after. Brought a little bit more detail in here. It just looks a little bit crunched and too much, so what I do is I'll drop this opacity down to somewhere around 70%. And now it's just a nice, subtle change. Get a little more detail on the rocks, a little bit more of an emphasis on this light coming over the ridge. Overall, it has a really nice effect. And now I'm going to add grain. The grain adds a beautiful texture to the sky, and it works amazing on landscape images. You can see in here, looks beautiful. And now with my curves layer, just because the grain usually brings down the image exposure by about a stop, I'm going to boost this up. And here you go, your before and after. Just looks a little bit more like a painting. Save. Next. This looks like someone passed out on the trail or having a nap. As my friend told me, it was someone escaping from the heat during the trail. So this one, I love all the texture of it, so we're really going to emphasize that. So let's start with our treatment. It looks great. I love all the muted colors, but maybe it'll look better in black and white. He gets a little bit lost in black and white, so let's keep it in color. I feel like I can use another contrast move. And maybe half of that. That looks pretty good. I'm going to adjust the exposure manually. So we still have our curves layer. I got one brighter and then one that brings everything down. Let's start with the layer that brings it down. Again, big brush. Just paint it in. I like to do the dot technique. But the bigger the brush, the slower it's going to be. So maybe this is too big of a brush. See, the sky's already getting much bluer. We're getting details in the mountains back there. And all this texture, you know, kind of comes alive. But we lose the subject a little bit. So let's bring him into the mix by switching over our layers. Just make sure we can see him. Make sure he's the focus here. Maybe his water bottle too. Looks incredible. Don't have to do too much here. I don't really want to mess with anything. Just wanted to give it a nice texture. Bring this down. Make sure everything was leveled. Everything was kind of well balanced. It's very green. So I think we can add just a tad more contrast. Let's give it a little bit more zip. Let's do our color balance. I usually like to do a little blue and cyan. I gave it a nice coolness to it, especially because of the sky. But so I'll bring that down just a little bit. I don't really care for this one, this curves layer that we talked about in the previous image. So there you go, that's the before and after. See, it's a little washed out here, especially with the background here. Everything becomes rich and everything becomes nice and saturated. Now let's add our grain. If you want to have a full tutorial on the grain, you know where to find it, link in my description. This grain looks fantastic. I always flip it on and off. Can probably use a little boost to the curves. Great. Save. Here's a beautiful one. Let's zoom in on it. It's a little soft, a little out of focus, but that's great. We can use that to our advantage just by hitting it with contrast, doing a lot of moves in terms of balance, and we can make this look like a painting. Let's throw the treatment on. Get rid of the same old message. Now let's see what it did here. These things really pop out. Really pop out, so let's get rid of those. Not sure what they are, but your eye goes right to them. So I don't think they should be there. You can always flip them back if he says that was important. I know I'm changing what he saw, but it's all about getting rid of distractions that would make your eye linger where they used to be rather than looking at the overall image. I'm looking right, that's the center. Alright, that looks fantastic. I'm going to give it just a little bit more zip. Just until these start to lose it. Just until you start to lose detail here, because then I'm going to bring that right back. But first, I'm going to start by darkening down the sky just a little bit. Especially where that sun is creeping through. I just want detail everywhere. That looks so good. Bigger brush, go along those back mountains. Bring it along up here. Didn't like that last move. Alright, let's brighten. So you try to do it in sections. And try to do it subtly, so if you make a mistake, you don't have to start over. It's just small moves. I see the lights coming in here, so I want to pay more attention to where it hits first, and then fill in where the gaps are. This is nice and dark here. You can already see the lushness starting to come through. Beautiful. A little more in those background, with the lights actually hitting it, just to emphasize that. A little bit more in the mountains. You see, it's just something you chip away at. It's not a big move right away. And now you can understand why they call it peeling back the onions. You just got to do it slowly and steadily. But yeah, big difference. And I love how it accentuates the certain little pockets throughout this landscape. I think it's a little flat in here, so I'm going to give it just a little bit more contrast just in the corner there. So we're only looking at this chunk of the mountain. I'm not looking at the rest of the image. get rid of it by pushing Apple Delete. And now with a bigger brush, I'm just painting that move in. Very subtle, but it just marries it a little bit closer with this. You can also paint it in the background a little bit more just to give it, well, I love that, but I think I just went a little too much. Do the same thing with these mountains. Nice and subtle. Alright, I'm going to add a little bit of blue to the sky. I feel like I could use a little cyan and blue overall. That's great. I went a little too far, so I'm going to bring the opacity down by 50% so you can really make it a nice subtle move. Get rid of this curves layer. And then boost the curve up. That's great. Now this one, I feel like I probably went a little too far in terms of treatment. So that's why I'm going to do the same thing I did in the first image and just dial it back. Maybe somewhere around 70%. Just nice zip. Now let's look for any anomalies in the sky like we had in the first image. Oh, it looks great. Let's add some grain. Now this grain looks a little too heavy. So one thing I can do first is actually bring this curves out of the group. So it's just lifting a little bit more, doing a little bit more of the legwork. And I'm also going to bring this grain down a little bit. I don't want it to be too distracting. But it will give a nice timeless quality to it. And I'm going to bring this down. Just a little bit, because that's a big move. Now let's see the original. By holding Option and clicking, I can see the original. It's fantastic. It's a nice richness to it. Save. Alright, another one. This one, I love the sky, so we gotta make sure we hit the sky, and I love the saturation of this, but I think this would be a great black and white. I'm gonna do it in black and white, but I'll show you how to easily switch over in case we don't like it. So, do my treatment setup. You can see how I'm already starting to lose the sky, so what I'm gonna do is just copy and paste it. So now I have this sky. I can bring it back whenever I want. So first, let's make this black and white. I'll add it to the very top of the image. So in case we ever want to get rid of it, very simply we can. And I'm going to give it right away another contrast layer. I'm going to overdo it. So we're going to bring the sky back. And I'm going to dot it in. You'll see what I mean in a second when I say dot it in. This is legacy, so this is almost, I don't know if it's 10 times more, but this is a lot more contrast than what you're used to. You can see in here, especially when I turn it on and off. Big difference. Alright, I like how that looks. So because we already had that, I'm going to do one more and keep that up in my back pocket. So that's nice. And then to the contrast layer we just did, this is the one I'm going to dot in or paint in. You can already see it's a big difference here. Don't worry about getting it too dark. I've already told you about that. We'll fix that in a second. Now we lose our hiker just a little bit. But we'll bring him back or her back right now. This is a little bit too much. I'm going to drop it down to 10. Cool. See, I don't know. This is an old trick I used to do, but I'm kind of going with the grain. With the slope of the mountain. You just want it to be naturally. Just mimic what the image is doing, and you really can't do any wrong. It's all experimentation. Now these trees could use a little bit of brightening up, but it looks like they're just a little too dark. Let's look back at the original. Yeah, there's detail there. So what I'm going to have to do is go even deeper. Let me finish doing these broad strokes first. Alright, I'm not going to worry too much about the sky because we're painting that thing in just a little moment with that copy and pasted layer that we had. But for now, let's work on this hiker because this hiker looks pretty dark. So under this, my brightness and contrast layers, I'm going to do a nice big move so I can see all the detail of this guy. And I get all the detail back in the trees. So zooming in. You can go up a little higher here because we're just being crude, so we can brighten it. 20% is nice. A few brush strokes and you can see the details already back. I'm going to go a little bit more aggressive, up to 30% for these trees though. And I'm just going to kind of crudely do it. You don't really want to go outside. You can see it makes a big difference when you go outside. You really do want to stay in the guides here. This is coloring in the lines. You can already see this is actually a mistake. It's making it a lot brighter here. This is what we don't want. So I'm going to reverse this and paint it back. And my solution here is just to use a bigger brush and dot it in a lot more subtly, but broader. You can afford to get away with it here. Just a little bit. You can see where there's white marks underneath it. That will really get extra white and your eye's just going to go right there. This is a very tricky thing to do. But you see, I'm not too worried about it because I know I'm going to bring all these levels back with my big opacity move at the end. I tend to have a habit of going too far and then bringing it back at the end. That already makes a big difference. I like that very contrasted look, so I'm not too stressed about it. Bring the sky back. You can see it's right up there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a contrast layer to this. Now the key is hold Option in between layers and it will make them link. So now this brightness and contrast move will only affect that layer that I have. So we're going to make this sky nice and dramatic. Beautiful. Okay. And here's something else we're going to do. We're just going to stretch this down a little bit using our liquefy tool all the way across. If we didn't do this, you'd get a weird line around the sky. You can already see this line here. Even though I've crunched it all, it's creating like this white line that just happens when you use too much contrast or when a black and a white object mix. So by stretching it, we can just paint it in and we avoid that whole mess. So make this into a mask. Flip your board out using X and hold Command Delete. And then just with a big brush again, remember 20%, just dot it in. Yes, I'm getting it over the mountains, but I'm going to paint that right back. Yeah, it's a beautiful sky. Now, flip it to X, 100%. This is another sneaky trick. You can hold the R tool and rotate your artboard. So you can zoom in and you can just draw in a nice light straight line. There's no way to get this back. If you move your artboard, Apple Z will not help. So you have to push R again. You can see up here. Push it to 0. You're back to normal. Zoom out. You can see that there's a little extra here, so you can paint this back. Beautiful. It's a nice looking sky. Still a little bit much, so I'm gonna bring it back. Now let's see our before and after. Really cool. Sky looks a little weird, but if you're not flipping it on and off, it will look perfect. So I'm going to make this guy stand out just a little bit more. Going back to my brighter tool. Whoops. And making sure I'm on the right setting. Making sure it's not at 100%. And just giving him a little dot just so he has a little bit more visibility there. I feel like I can do some overall brightness in here on these mountains. Amazing. Now I'm actually going to go in. I feel like I flattened it out quite a bit. I'm actually going to go in and give it another contrast layer. I know, how could you be doing that? But just need it to be a little snappier. That's very snappy. I love that. So now, I'm going to put all of these into a group. Flip it on and off, see how it looks. I really like it. It really brings the detail out in the mountains. And it gives it, the sky looks fantastic. So what I'm actually going to do is just bring this back a little bit. Just ease us in there. And then, what's great is if he says I liked it in color more, then I can always just bring back the color here. Do my color treatments. But for now, let's leave it black and white. It's nice and stark. It's a nice stark image. And I always think black and white suit very graphic, sharp, bold images like this one. So I'm going to add my grain. We're off to the last one. Fantastic. Last one. This one is gorgeous. So let's just ramp it up a little bit. I feel like I really want to accentuate the color. And that's about it. Give it the too much zip. I don't really want to mess with it. Just turning it into a nice TIFF form. Continue. So this already did quite a bit. I'm not going to add any more contrast at the moment. But I'm going to brighten these trees up a little. This move can be done a little bit more with 11%. Again, I don't want this too bright. I might even darken this down. I want all of your attention here. This kind of sticks out a little bit. Get some detail in here. I just don't want it to be totally black. Bringing back all the detail in the trees, just dotting it in. Very Bob Ross. Just paint it in. Just tap it in. Alrighty. Come across the sky here. This looks great. I want to bring this down a little bit, just so it balances in with the rest of the trees. Went a little too far there. Smaller brush, and just paint with it. That's great. Now I actually want to add a little bit more zip to the sky. Actually, I'm going to take this, darken this down just a bit. You want it there, but you don't want your attention to be taken away from the amazing colors. I like that. I want your eyes here, not here. So I'm going to add a little bit more zip to the sky. Let's pop this full. Look how lush that gets. That's crazy. So now I'm going to delete this. And with that same brush I have, I'm just going to tap it in. It just gives you very subtle moves. You're not coming in. I'm actually going to come in a little hotter. It's around 35. And just tap in where the colors are and all the detail and the beautiful clouds are. See this on and off. Just giving it a little bit more richness. Great. It's a little washed out in here. Let's see what we can do if we can get a little bit more detail up there. Yeah, see that? That's nice. We're not going to get it this blue because the clouds turn almost completely black. So what you want is just a little bit. If I can get anything back from there, I'll be happy. And since the clouds are kind of black up here, we can kind of afford to make these ones a little darker. It's just adding a little bit more drama to the sky, which I love. Go brighter. Just lift these clouds that I touched a little bit. That was way too bright. You can see it's all opacities. Everything's about opacities. And that's a great image. On and off. Didn't do much to it. I just kind of accentuated the colors and gave it an amazing tones. Really brought this out in here. That's ridiculous. I love that. Get rid of this curves layer. I'm gonna bump this up just a little bit. Go to my grain. This almost looks like a painting. The grain's a little too heavy in here. I mean, I like it, but I don't want the first thing for you to notice is the grain. Just drop it down around 70%. I'm actually going to bring this down to around 70% as well. Alright, so now that it's in a group, you can see the before and after is quite drastic. But I love the saturation in the sky. I'm just still going to bring this down about 85%. Just so it's a little more subtle. Save. And there you have it. After that, I'm going to do my exporting. If you want to know how I export, there's a video in the description. But for now, we got ourselves some great photos ready to be printed, ready to be hung. And there you go. Got some great images with a little bit of my flair on it, a little bit of my magic wand. But we're using the same techniques, whether it be portraits, skin. We can use the same workflow on any images, really. Alright guys, if you have any questions, leave a comment below. And if you like this video, make sure you hit like and subscribe. My name is Corey Vanderplu, at CoreyPhoto on Twitter and Instagram. Happy shooting.